Good evening, sir.
Yeah, the topic is burden on education. I'm going to burden myself on my two illustrious co-panelists. Dr. Krishna, Nanditha Krishna is a very eminent educationist, writer, historian. Mr. Sircar is MP, Rajya Sabha MP, TMC, recommended by the TMC, and also a former broadcasting personality. Okay, now, I mean, the subject of every good conclave is burdens. Burdens on society, burdens on women, burdens on, geopolitics. So this time it's burdens on education. So, ma'am, let me pose the first question to you. What do you think are the burdens Indian education is bearing?
We have to look at our education. Why were these schools and colleges set up? The schools were set up to create clerks for the East India Company. Then the British Empire came about, and it became a little better, where they were also having people at the government.
Yeah, just right distance.
At the governance level. So they had set up colleges. And they did not set up the schools and colleges for education. So as a result today, we have this system where it's all learn by rote. We have people just learning the same thing. I mean, I mentioned earlier that I know one professor who, for 30 years of her career, and she was the head of her department, she had a book of notes where she would just read them out. And she comes from a very eminent college in Chennai. And she'd read them out. The children had to take down the notes. When she retired, she asked me, because I have colleges, and she said, would one of your teachers be able to use it? So this is the big problem. I mean, this is the kind of rubbish our young people are learning. What should education do? It has to make them think. It has to make their brains more creative. And so that it has to make them challenge what they learn. But at present, our system does not encourage that. And I think one of this is the kind of education that we are getting. That is a baggage. The second is the baggage of the caste system. And I think this is something that is a big problem, because when a child enters school, parents have to mention the child's caste. When a student goes to college, they have to mention their caste. And did you come in on the MBC quota, OBC quota? Which quota did you come in on? As a result, everybody knows your caste, origins, and this goes on. I mean, you're not breaking. The only way to break it is to stop discussing caste.
Your previous conversation we had in private, we had discussed how there was no caste before, a directive came from the government sometime in the 50s, something like that, and how this family came. It's a good story to illustrate, so people can understand from a human perspective.
Till about 10 to 15 years ago, we never took down in our schools or colleges, of course, they came with a caste, but schools, we never asked for the caste of the children. Then one day, we received a directive from the government that you have to collect all the castes, I'm fine, thank you, get all the castes of the children and write it down and give it to the government. It was shocking that 2 parents came. They were scheduled caste parents, and they said, why are you asking us for our caste? Because we sent out a letter saying, please inform us about the caste of your child. And they said, we put our child in your school because you never asked for the caste, and now you're asking. So, I mean, this is the way our governments are also functioning. They're going back to this caste. I mean, now you and I don't know your caste, you don't know my caste, it's fine. When I went to school, we were never asked about our caste, and to this day, I do not know the caste of my classmates. We're all senior citizens, very senior now. But we don't know our caste. So this is what we have to get rid of, this constant what's your caste? Do you go into MBC, SC, whatever?
So caste is a burden of
problem.
education. Yeah, lobbing the question to you, Mr. Kar.
Would you like me to talk on this? Or,
No, the
in a
basic
broader-
question, no, the basic question is, what, in your view, is the burden on Indian education?
Yes, that would depend on what you mean by education. Sanjeev just spoke about making bunking college a sacred art. Everybody bunks college. Some do it more, some do it less, but a college is a place where you start settling post-adolescent relationships. You meet people who were not part of your family, and there's a lot of social interaction. It's actually rehearsal for you to tackle society. That part is completely forgotten. The transmission of certain educational content is not the all of education. Education is just not transmitting educational content. It is beyond that. When you meet in a college, or otherwise we have to say that Plato, Aristotle, and all others, and including Nalanda and Taxila, they were all wrong. You have to have a place where you congregate, fight it out, discuss, make new friends, and exchange ideas. Okay, so having said that, I would say that the baggage is also there. I mean, one can't deny, because our education system has some amount of continuum from Macaulay's Minute. And I also believe that substantive changes were not made in a form post-independence. There's been content change, there have been new discoveries that have been factored in, new knowledge that has been factored in, and there is a general feeling now, right now, and under the present, let us say, dispensation, that it is too westernized. So that it is too westernized, and these baggages need to go. That is a matter of considerable value judgment. So I'm distinguishing between modifying and upgrading the educational syllabus and whether it needs to conform to a particular ideology. These are two different things.
Okay, so, if you look at it, Indian education is very strongly dominated by the left.
Yeah.
In fact, as you say, when history is written by the victors, I mean, it's very true in this case, because history is the battlefield of education today. I'm taking the case of Savarkar. I mean, Savarkar now is the West's poster boy of hate, poster boy of colonial apology. I mean, the man spent, we never studied anything about him. The man spent 16 or 15 years in jail. So a man who spent 15 years in jail fighting the British cannot be just an approver or a lackey of the British. I mean, it's impossible. We know nothing about the man. When I grew up studying, I knew nothing about Savarkar. I mean, as I was discussing with Mrs. Krishnan here, Gandhi wrote letters to the British. So why is Gandhi such a great hero, and why is Savarkar a villain? So, whoever writes history is written by patronage. I mean, that has been the oldest trick in the book. I mean, whoever is... So, and history needs patronage. So you had a socialist system. Started by a Fabian socialist called Nehru. The age was different. It was more cosmopolitan when, prime ministers smoked cigarettes, or, finance ministers smoked pipes, or, prime ministers spoke French. That is a different age altogether. All right? So after that, then Indira Gandhi, who completely changed the thing and made it into, let's say, a socialist salon. Education, she turned it into a socialist salon, right? So what we have inherited from those years is what was being taught till today. Now the left wants to reverse it. That's why the right wants to reverse it. Now, how the right is reversing is to be seen yet. But I don't think, what do we know about Shyam Prasad Mukherjee? I mean, nothing. I mean, he was an intellectual. He was a kind of, a person who kind of, was a social worker. All kinds of stuff. So you choose which icons to promote. That is the problem with, education, in my opinion, especially in India. As India, which is culturally so anguished, about its place in history. So what do you think, how should a fair and equitable information of history be disseminated?
Disseminated.
Yeah.
Can I answer that?
That's why
Because I'm a historian, and I think what is not done is challenge the students. ask them to find out, give them names, left, right, center, whatever the political beliefs of the icon you are talking about. The problem is that everything is spoon-fed to them or not given at all. When we studied, as you said, we never studied about Savarkar, we never studied about Swami Vivekananda, we knew nothing about Aurobindo, nothing about Subramanya Bharati. I mean, we never learnt all this when we were in school. So I think the time has come that all these names from all over India, there are enough names. I may like one, I may not like another, but students must be challenged. And the only way to do this is to ask them to do the research and talk about them. No research is done till you register for a PhD degree. Frankly, that is too late because the whole ability to research has gone by then. So from the time they enter college, there's subjects they should study. I really think that we have to have a kind of a galaxy of names in Indian history. Take modern Indian history if you want, because that's more pertinent for us. And ask the students to come out with them, because there aren't enough books. There are books about, one book about Savarkar, is it right or left? The rightist will say he's good, leftist will find only faults. So let the students themselves find out. But I think this galaxy of names must be given to students, and they must be asked to find out more.
See,
I have two comments that I think would help the discussion. Number one, we are discussing this in 2024, when there's a lot of technology and a lot of information available on the internet anyway. Every child of consequence uses a mobile and a smartphone or shares one. They are aware of a lot of things that we don't seem to know. The amount of information that comes on the net, good, bad, ugly, good and informative in the most cases. So that's number one.
Or like wiki knowledge. Like wiki knowledge is a pejorative way of...
Wiki knowledge, WhatsApp, university, fake news, whatever you say. The point is we can't have any control on that stream of knowledge. That stream of knowledge, if you put that
Stream of information.
I would say that let the system find its own solution. Students or youngsters are not some creatures to be spoon-fed. When we talk of spoon-feeding also, to them it's a question of survival. To the better placed, it's a question of excelling. To most, it's a question of surviving. And it's a part of the survival skill as to how to use the information and get through this hurdle. So that's also one. That's a
pretty sad way of...
So what I'm saying is, in our time, it was just the syllabus and the classroom and nothing beyond that. But now they're exposed to a lot of information that they pick up anyway. That's my point. Beyond classes. And sometimes more important than classes, self-education. The second point is, you just touched upon history. I'll take only 1 minute for that. History is just one subject, and usually a very boring one. No. I from history.
Subject in the world.
I used to find it extremely boring in college. The question is, history is the foundation of a civilization, defines. And a civilization is one that collectively remembers some parts of the past and collectively forgets some parts of the past. Collective forgetting, amnesia, and collective remembering are stimulated by education. The education is one of the greatest stimulants to it. That's all.
What's happened?
Yes, I would like to say one thing. You said history was very boring. Yes, history was very boring when we all studied. But that is because there was, again, a very sanitized form of history, leftist history, where, again, they chose to teach us what they wanted to teach. There was so much we could have learned. For example, I mentioned Aurobindo. No, nobody taught you about Aurobindo. I mean, because I live in Chennai and Pondicherry is next door, and I'm interested, I find out. Ask a student in Bombay whether they've ever heard of Aurobindo. I grew up in Bombay. Nobody knew about the Pallavas and Cholas. Nobody, even in Tamil Nadu, many students don't know that Rajendra Chola conquered the whole of Southeast Asia and things like that. I think it's fascinating if it is made interesting. It is boring because the books are dull.
I practice history and I've read your books. I'm not saying history is boring. I'm saying to a student, especially in the afternoon classes, when somebody goes on
I
rattling
don't
dates.
think you should get to you're kind of tripping yourself. No, let me ask you one thing. I mean, like, you represent. I mean, is it correct to say you represent a party? I mean, which is very, very strong Bengali identity. I mean, especially with Mrs. Banerjee. Ms. Banerjee wanted to change the name to Bangla, etc., etc. And now to the left liberal, the educated left liberal and the educated left liberal intellectual. The word Hindu is a bad word. All right, it's a very bad word. If you say you're a Hindu, you're a bad guy. You know, you must say that, you know, I'm a secular liberal. I mean, I'm talking about that particular kind of people. Now, if you look at the way the Bengal Renaissance has been, you know, portrayed by us, the syllabus is something I don't know, so I'm just asking you. I mean, from outside Bengal, Aurobindo has, I just heard the name in a textbook in passing, man with a long beard, that's it. Arya Samaj. Radharam Mohan Roy is only a guy who, I mean, very significantly, who ended Sati. Tagore himself. So the Gitanjali is a Hindu aesthetic of poetry. I mean, you know, you cannot deny it. So I'm not politicizing the whole thing. I'm talking about culturally, why does Bengal, from the Congress to the Communists to TMC, why is the Hindu Renaissance aspect of Bengal not projected as that, but with different facets? Okay, he's a freedom fighter, he's a Nobel Prize winning poet, he returned his, and we know more about Tagore about returning his Nobel Prize than what he's actually done, you know, for Bengal Indian culture or Hindu culture. Can I answer, is the TMC doing anything about it, or you kind of?
This part of history is very interesting in the sense that social reform and religious reform were required about 200 from the early part of the 19th century. And incidentally, the social reform movement for caste equality, for removal of religious superstition in Bengal was led from the early 20th century, and everyone you speak about, whether it be Ram Mohan or whether it be this thing of Tagore or Vidyasagar, everybody was a Brahmin. So that consciousness came to them at that point of time, number one. Number two, social reforms in the rest of India had to be led by the so-called backward groups. They had to seize their position. They had to go through a lot of intellectual fight, lot of social fight, and including physical conflicts to find their place under the sun. Tamil Nadu is one of the best examples of where you get this coming up from Periyar and others. But here it was what I would put it almost commissioned from the top. Not that these progressive Brahmins who led the Bengal Renaissance, the intellectual movement, debris clearing, junk clearing movement, burden clearing movement, not that they had full support. They did not have full support of society, but they were the winning group, the one that was ultimately established. People who were opposed in 1820 were accepted in 1860 as being before that time. So that part remains, that intellectual, the educational, this was one of the results was a clash with Western education. The system of our traditional Sanskrit education and Islamic education clashed with Western education because the fellows were there in full strength. From this clash, this class of intellectuals learned to pick up the best points of science and reason, rationality and others, classlessness, castelessness. They picked it all up, most of them, and fought it out. Women's emancipation starting with sati.
No, see, religion, the thing is that...
I'm not saying that it's a honky-dory thing. All I'm saying is this is an explanation.
No, I mean, because there is context. I mean, you're talking about the context. That context is what is important then. But, the removal of religion from understanding science and history, I think it's... Because religion, the church was
They
patronized
made religion
Galileo.
less important, number one. And I'll tell you something very interesting.
No, I would debate
Fellows
you on that.
who went out to Bengalis or Indians who went out and crossed the 7 seas to England or Europe were immediately excommunicated.
That crossing the
Okay,
sea, yeah.
and when they came back, there was a ghat near Calcutta called Prashchittam Ghat. They got down, paid the Brahmin priest, got themselves purified and brought back.
So all the barristers came back.
Barristers, lawyers, doctors, they all came back, did Prashchittam.
Not bad. See,
Some had to shave their heads or whatever. They came back and then they got back to society.
Hinduism is religion of solutions, no?
So they came up with solutions.
Dr. Krishna, I want to ask you a question. This is a very specific question which could be part of your... I am taking this whole kind of Hindu trope basically because today it is, especially after Ram Mandir, it is being kind of battered about. You're not supposed to every Hindu, somebody who says Hindu is a rara guy. So, again, coming back to the left control of Indian education, very little is taught about Subramania Bharati in the north. Very little taught except he was a freedom fighter. I don't know what it means by freedom fighter, but the guy was a great devotional poet. He was a poet. I mean, how many people have read translations of Subramania Bharati in UP or Kashmir? I have no clue. Nothing is taught about the Razakar thing in Hyderabad. Nothing is taught about, no big chapters on the Moplo Rebellion. So when you talk about Hindutva hijacking today's educational agenda, an alternate agenda through ignoring or suppressing information was already going on by the left. So do you think this is a reaction to it, or this is a revelation of it, or this is a kind of slant? What do you think as an experienced professor?
You see, for 75 years, we have had a very Islamized view of history, not by the Muslims. It's by the left, so-called liberals. I think that left liberal is a wrong term. Left is right, but they were not liberals because they just removed whatever they didn't like. Like they didn't want the Razakars to be shown up in a bad way. I never studied in history that the Razakars did anything in Hyderabad. It was much later, when I picked up books that I learnt about them. So I think we have been dominated too much by this leftist history. And this is a part of the baggage that our education system carries. Now we are coming to a right with more rightist ideas, perhaps, but then that is bound to happen. Somewhere along the way, I think left and right will find a median. But so far, we've gone so far left, we have to go right to learn about the other part of India, which was left out.
Okay, now time is short. She's already making faces at me. So any questions from this audience? Nobody is asking such interesting intellectuals any questions? All right. Everybody wants to be sunk in ignorance.